And you've just heard The End of the World by Lloyd's House, taken from the album also called Lloyd's House. And I'm delighted to be joined by Lloyd now. Hello there.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, very good. And congratulations on the album. How do you feel now that it's out?
Quite relieved to be honest. Like I've had it ready to go for so long, and there's been quite a few like setbacks with like initially I wanted to get vinyl pressings made and all these other things, but with COVID it's just been like crazy trying to get everything done. But yeah, it feels great that it's finally out and people seem to be digging it. So
So that's interesting. Did you just decide, right, I'm going, these songs have been there now, I'm going to get it out, and certain plans had to be put aside?
sort of, yeah. I mean, initially like I knew I wanted to write and record an album, but I wasn't really sure like what it was gonna be or like how I was gonna do it. Um, and after a while, I just sort of started doing it like out of just boredom, I guess. I just wanted to start doing it. And it kind of ended up as like as what it was. Um, and so after that, I was like, right, well, this is an album. Let's get on with it and try and put it out somehow. So
That kind of goes to my next question, was how did you write and record it?
so kind of like a mix of different methods, I suppose. Like most of the time, I write songs just sort of in my bedroom, mucking about on a guitar or a bass. Or that's the other thing is like the whole album. There's no guitar on it; it's all bass.
Mm.
Um, so I'd kind of just sit around on my bass and muck about until I found something that sounded cool, I guess. And then I'd sort of like flesh it out a bit more and write lyrics for it and stuff like that. Um, and so there were a few songs where I had like pretty like vivid ideas of what I wanted, and then other songs that were more like just spur of the moment, kind of sit down with the 8 track and just start recording it and see what happens, I guess.
And was that out of necessity, or would you have recorded that way anyway?
Um, I don't know. I think that's the thing with like with COVID and lockdown and things like that. It's hard to, especially at this stage as a musician, it's like it's hard to fathom spending a lot of money on recording somewhere, um, because it's a lot of like upfront costs, and
Yeah.
I think I would have liked to have recorded it somewhere else, but I'm glad I didn't in a lot of ways because I think it taught me a lot. Like, because I've never like, I self-produced the EP I released in January last year, and then mixing this was kind of like a next step because there was a lot more to it and like a lot of auto tune and different effects and things that I hadn't used before. So I'm sort of glad I did, um, in that respect. But yeah, it's just hard. Like a lot of musicians, I think, struggle with the upfront cost of like that kind of thing, and you know, I guess I was a bit fearful as well because I was like, what if I spend loads of money on a studio and then I think like, oh, these songs are, not as good as I thought they were gonna be. So, but yeah,
Well, I think what the last year or so has shown is what can be done, maybe on your own, rather than perhaps all going straight to a studio.
yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword, I think, because it's great the fact that it's so easy now to just like sit in your bedroom and be able to write an album and record it and release it. Like that's amazing. And it gives a lot of people opportunities to do that, which is good. But then I guess the downside is sort of it can make it difficult for people to really get into the music industry, I suppose. Or I hate that term really, but like you know, it can make it more difficult for people to get to kind of get there because there's that expectation, especially for like labels and things like that, where it's like you need to come to them with like a fully finished product before you're even considered for something.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess it's both it's both good and bad in different ways, I suppose.
And with the songs themselves, I kind of think of them as almost like little, like short stories, little glimpses into lives, because they are quite short and succinct, and they're often
Mm.
stories in themselves.
Mm.
Um, how did you approach writing them?
Um, I guess a lot of the time, um, they're not like stories that I've like sort of thought about before and then wanted to write down, coherently. It's more like I'll have like a couple of lines that just pop into my head that I think like, oh, that could be cool to sort of develop out and think on. And then most of the time it'll be like a hook for a chorus or something like that, or like a verse. And then I'll sort of write around it and like kind of go outwards from there, I guess. And I feel like they always end up being about me or something, someone else or something, somehow. Even if it doesn't specifically, mention anything like that, it always ends up like representing, a time where I was feeling a certain way, I guess.
And are there themes that kind of run through the album?
Yeah, I'd say self-determination's a big one. Like I guess there's a lot of like I don't know, like actualization, if that's the right word for like, I guess like sexual identity and stuff like that. There's a lot of that that runs through the album, I think, and a lot of um, say like just confusion, really, a lot of confusion at the same time because it's a mix of like sort of coming to terms with like a new identity, but then at the same time experiencing the like confusion and like feeling disorientated with that new identity, I guess.
And those kind of feelings of kind of self-reflection and confusion, I guess, were heightened by the situation of COVID and lockdown and things like that.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of my pals really, um, spent lockdown going through a lot of, mental issues and stuff. And for me, it was like before I never really had the chance to like work on it that much or
Yeah.
like think about it in a more, developed way. And then as soon as lockdown hit, it was like suddenly everyone's got all this time to themselves to just sit and think about, who they are. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I've got a lot more issues than I thought I did. And then,
I actually think, confronting it, not confronting them, but you using those to make music or to write a book or to kind of channel them into art is actually a really good way of thinking about them yourself. Is that kind of how you saw it?
yeah, for sure. It's like a lot of the time, there's things you can do when you've got things nagging you and stuff. But I feel like for me, I guess songwriting is like it's a way to kind of flesh it out in a way that isn't very like direct. Like it's not just kind of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. It's like you can go so much more, broad than that and write in ways that convey different feelings and in a more intense way that like means different things to different people as well. And then
Yeah,
at the end, you
absolutely.
have an art form as well, which is great
Well, that's
because
what I feel
it's
about the
yeah.
album is it feels really personal, but it's also something that I think will strike a chord with listeners too. So as you see,
Mm.
you can take the songs away and interpret them in their own way, and maybe think about their own situations too.
Yeah, exactly. They're hopefully songs that can resonate with everyone in different ways and for different reasons, I suppose. Um, so
And it's quite a distinctive sound, a kind of lo-fi, a bedroom, lockdown feel
yeah.
about it. Who and what were your influences on your music?
Um, so I'd say Elvis Depressedly is probably a huge one for me. Like I got into his music not even that long ago, like maybe 2019, the end of 2019, um, and I just fell in love with it and just listened to like all of his music on repeat for that solid year, and I think it just like
Seeped
just did
in.
something to me. Yeah, and a lot of Beck as well, but especially Elvis Depressedly because he's got a very like lo-fi recording process as well where it's it sounds really like hi-fi and like quite high production, but then the drum sounds and like certain parts of it are really like fuzzy and warm and saturated and stuff like that. And so I think that's what kind of inspired the sound quite a bit, and songwriting as well, where it's like abstract but also quite like there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Beck's an interesting one because that's kind of who I was thinking of, some of the more quieter Beck records, and
Mm-hmm.
which are similarly kind of introspective.
Yeah. I definitely like Sea Change by Beck is probably my favorite album of his.
Yeah, it's my favorite
Um,
album of his as well. I just
yeah, it's just so good. Like one of my favorite albums just for like production as well. Like I just think it's so well produced, and the songwriting as well. Like just everything about that album is just so like inspiring to me.
it's a great example. And I think your album does something similar where you think if this was produced in a different way, and maybe if you'd gone into a studio or something like that, it would be a
Hmm.
completely different record and probably, nowhere near as good a record too.
Yeah, yeah.
So considering how the songs were recorded, are you intending to play them live and if so, what kind of setup will that be?
Yeah, so we played a gig with a full band on the 15th of November last month. And that was really good. I was planning to release the album closer to then, which is why the gig was then. But it was kind of nice to play the songs before everyone had like listened to the album, I suppose. So for that, I play a baritone guitar, and then I've got someone on bass, someone on guitar, someone on synth, and someone on drums. And then the synth and the guitar player sort of share percussion and tambourine. Because I think after like a lot of those songs have tambourine and percussion, and after listening through to it again, I was sort of like, oh, I think it definitely needs that live, and especially synth as well. Like I wanted it to be a bit more like poppy, because sometimes I feel like I can sort of fall into the like rock tendencies just from holding a guitar in your hands, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
But I kind of want to drift away from that a wee bit and go in a different direction, I guess. So, but yeah, it was nice.
Because you're saying there's no guitar on the album. So it
Hmm.
does get a different dynamic. Almost as soon as you put a guitar on, it gives the whole thing a different dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been good though, and also like it's been good to sort of figure out how to play the songs again in a different context, because different people bring different things to the songs, and like obviously some of the drum patterns and things for when we're playing live are different to how they are in the album, which ends up sounding really cool because it's almost like a different song. Um, but then also it's been a bit of a pain in the arse because the baritone guitar is like so confusing trying to match up like what I'm playing with what the bass player and the guitar player is playing because it's like two steps down or whatever. So it's just a bloody nightmare like trying to figure out how to play my own songs again.
But
But
it's interesting. I wonder if people that went to see you live and then hear the album, it must be quite a different thing for them, even though they're the same songs.
yeah, exactly.
And so have you plans for kind of further releases, or is it far too soon to kind of think about that?
I'm definitely thinking about it at the moment. I think for the next, I definitely all I'll say is that I definitely want to get on top of another album, and properly spend a lot of time in a studio working on it, with some other people.
Yeah.
Um, Probably I should probably give a shout out to Jason Shaw who mastered it. Really good friend of mine as well, and because his production is just incredible. He's just so good. So I'd quite like to work with him again throughout, like maybe the whole process.
Right.
Instead of starting like by myself and just doing, recording the whole thing myself, like work with other people a bit more and properly flesh it out and you know take time with it. So
Is that something that perhaps you missed, was kind of being in a room with other musicians and bouncing ideas off each other, or were you quite happy that this was going to be, your vision?
um, I was pretty happy to start with. I think after a while of playing in bands and stuff, and obviously not being able to play gigs anymore, it was sort of a nice release to just be able to sit by myself and not have to worry about what anyone else thinks. Because if it sounded good to me, I was like, "Yep, that's fine, that's going in." And if not, it would get chucked away and no one would hear it. um, but I think it is nice now knowing that like if I wanted to get a string section in, I can do that, and
Yeah.
just make it. Again, back to Sea Change. Like there's just so many ideas I've had from that album that just make me think like I think I'm quite ready for a big like well produced album. So
And are these songs kind of already written? Were you continuing to kind of write during kind of lockdown, or was it just this album and then you've got others to write?
sort of continue to write. like all the time really. I'm sort of always just writing tunes. I don't really know. Like most of the time, I'll have like an idea for a project and then sort of write alongside that. And then the ones that I feel fit go in, and the ones that don't. Um, so yeah, I've been kind of writing a lot every day really, and then sort of seeing where I end up. So, but I think it would be nice to work with other people writing wise as well. Um, I'm really interested in doing that because although I feel like my songs like definitely stand up by themselves, I've got to big up my album. Um,
Absolutely.
um, I feel like it would be nice to write with other people as well and sort of like see what other people can bring to like the lyric writing part of it.
Well, I would love to hear that when it happens, but I have to say the album is a cracker. I've been really, really enjoying it. Lloyd, thanks so much for taking the time to have a chat.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And this is Lloyd's House and Eddie.